Welcome to the Ghostly Gallery podcast, a place where we explore the world of horror and mystery in film, television, books, and in popular culture. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to another show. Greetings to all. My name is Bruce Markison, and once again, I'm joined by my producer, co-host, Tracy Asteria. Tracy, what's going on with you?
Oh, not too much, Bruce. It's kind of raining cats and dogs here in Nova Scotia tonight. So I am looking forward to chatting with tonight's guest and getting all warm and cozy. How about you?
Absolutely nothing going on with me. So we'll get right to the guest. I can't tell you anything exciting going on here in Cooperstown, New York. So we'll get right to this week's guest, which is good for the guest and good for the show, I think. Joining this week, Tracy, on the podcast is Miguel Sancho. Miguel is an Emmy Award winning television producer. He currently show runs and develops series and specials for A&E. He is the executive producer of the TV series The Proof Is Out There and the author of a new book, Evidence of the Extraordinary. It is scheduled for release May 5th, so not too far away. Published by Atria Books, it's an evidence-based look at some of the world's greatest mysteries, things like cryptids and poltergeists and UFOs, things of that nature. Also should mention, Miguel previously helped oversee the ABC Primetime News Magazine 2020. Miguel, welcome to the show. How are you?
Great. Thank you so much for having us, having me here. And thank you to our audience, your audience, for lending us their ears.
Well, we're very glad to have you with us. I mentioned off air that a few months back, we had one of the stars of your show, The Proof Is Out There, Ken Gerhard, on with us, and he gave us a really insightful hour. You come highly recommended from Ken, so that's good enough for us right there.
Ken, great people, and he's written some great books too. He was, the show has now been around. Proof Is Out There has been around on the History Channel since 2020. Well, we started doing it in 2020. I think it premiered in 2021. Which is, a Jurassic age in TV. We just hit our 100th episode. And I say that just because Ken was one of our original people. And when you're, original on these shows, you're not just kind of helping fly the plane, you're helping design the plane. So Ken deserves a little bit of credit, not just for his on-air performance, but kind of helping format the show and helping create the show. And more importantly, teaching its executive producer a little bit about this stuff, because I was a complete newbie ignoramus when I kind of got dunked into this field. And one thing that you learn very quickly is there's a lot to learn.
Yeah. Another thing too, you mentioned the time frame, 2021. That's still tail end of the pandemic. Must not have been an easy time to start a new program.
No, not at all. And that's the COVID was a terrible thing in many ways, and just kind of a serendipitous factor in many people's lives, including mine. And what ended up happening was I'd had an ongoing, very productive relationship with A&D Networks, which is the family of channels, right, of which history is one. And they have a production company that hires showrunners to run their shows. And I had an existing relationship with them. But when COVID happened, the stuff that I normally do, like, serious, newsy documentaries where you're following people around in the field doing intense stuff, basically got completely put on ice. And so what TV shows there were these shows that based on cool pieces of footage that people had shot and that could be analyzed and could be explored and investigated. And the folks at History were kind enough to take a chance on me, a guy who had never done anything in this kind of space before, and gave me this show. And I asked, that was my first question. I was like, well, these shows, they've been around for a while. Everybody's going back to In Search Of. And, I watch my fair share of them, but I am not an expert. I'm not, somebody who can, at the time, could quote chapter and verse of these fields. So why would you pick me other than, my cologne. And they said, well, actually, this was a stroke of brilliance from our executive, said, we actually want somebody who comes out of more of a news and documentary space, because we want to be a show where we're actually applying some, journalistic rigor to the investigation of these things, and not just saying that, everything is a UFO, everything is Bigfoot, everything's a ghost, like a number of other shows do. Not taking anything away from them, and I don't begrudge them their success, but that was going to kind of be the differentiator for this show.
Yeah. Miguel, before we get into the book, I want to talk about your role. What exactly does an executive producer of a show do? The show, again, is Proof is Out There, airs Friday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern on the History Channel. As an executive producer, I mean, it's an important job. We know that, but specifically, what do you do?
Yeah, so it's funny you mentioned that. I'm 55 years old now. I've been doing this for a while. Back when I was in my late 20s, I was in a relationship with a woman who had no idea what I did for a living, and I tried to explain it to her several times, and it was still hard to explain. Not because she wasn't smart, just because it's such an amorphous term, and it can mean so many things in so many contexts. In the movies, it means something totally different, right? I heard Tom Hanks explain this once very well on a podcast. A executive producer of a movie means somebody who's putting some money into it and is helping, finance the thing. In the TV world, it basically means the person who is primarily responsible for midwifing the editorial content of the show from conception all the way to delivery. And if you're an executive producer who's brought on to run an existing show, that really means, as I would use my earlier analogy, just flying the plane and making sure each episode kind of lands safely. Whereas if you're the executive producer who's brought on right when the show's being, initially commissioned, you also have a certain role in kind of molding the lump of clay into a nice piece of ceramic pottery, or to use the other plane analogy, designing the plane while you're flying the plane. And that was one of the great challenges of the first season of the show. And the funny thing is, Bruce and Tracy, we got renewed after the first season aired. And of course, I was happy. You always want to get your shows renewed. But I said to myself, I got to tell you, I don't know if there's going to be enough videos out there to actually sustain this show for multiple seasons. Tells you how little I know, right? What I came to learn in my classic slow learner, late adapter kind of way, is that, of the 4 billion smartphones out there at any one time, I would say a good 2 million of them are being used to videotape something that the phone holder believes is an anomalous phenomenon. So there's this constant pipeline, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you see a lot of the videos go viral on YouTube. A lot of them, make local news headlines. So there is a large amount of interest. There's a large volume of this kind of content and a lot to chew on. And of course, what our show does is kind of put these videos and these eyewitnesses through the ringer and kind of stack it up against the analysis of some impressive experts and see what they come up with, see what they decide. And this is not a spoiler alert, 80% of the stuff can be explained. And we're not ashamed to say that, but there is that minority of stuff that cannot be explained and leaves us kind of scratching our heads. That's not to say that, maybe once more information or more technology emerges, it will be able to explain at some point, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's certainly, we can say with a straight face, and while maintaining our journalistic integrity, we can't explain what's going on here. And that's what kind of makes the show both interesting and fun for folks like me, who, when I first started doing this, thought, everything was a hoax or everything was a misidentification. And I had a very, I would say, rather parochial approach to this stuff, which is, since I'm happy to say, expanded.
Oh, wow. So I'm curious, you had mentioned that this interest kind of developed a little bit later on in life, but did you have any kind of interest maybe back when you were a kid or a teenager in ghosts or paranormal or anything spooky like that, or not at all?
Yeah. I will tell you a story, and stories can get so long and long-winded that by halfway through, you're convinced the story wasn't worth telling to begin with. So I'll keep it short. But I had what I think would now be called a case of sleep paralysis. When I was born in a tiny little town in eastern Kansas, Ottawa, Kansas, population 13,000 at the time. And my father was a teacher at this very small college there. My mother taught junior high school. And we had this house, which I remember. It's funny with things you remember. I mean, I remember details of this house. But I was there, and I was the oldest child. So at the time, I was an only child. And I had my bedroom, and I distinctly remember being asleep, but not being asleep. I was awakened, but I couldn't move. And I saw a figure at the end of my bed, okay, that was kind of tall and dark. And it looked like there was something on his head. I couldn't tell if it was a mask or if it was a hat or if it was like a monster who didn't have a normal human head. And that just totally freaked me out. And I told my mom about it the next day, and she said, "Oh, you were just dreaming or whatever." But I do not believe it was fully a dream, because I just remember more distinctly than any dream I've ever had. Anyway, so years and years and years later, I'm doing this show, and I find out that there is this actually relatively common phenomenon of the Hat Man. And who is the Hat Man? Well, some people think he's the devil. Some think he's just a malevolent spirit. But there's certain aspects of Hat Man encounters that mirror exactly what I experienced. The figure at the end of my bed, dark, tall. Hat Man is often described as wearing, like a wide awake hat or a fedora. I didn't have that degree of specificity. I said it could have been a hat, it could have been a mask, could have been something else. But it just brought back I always had the memory, but it just added a layer of meaning and legitimacy to the experience that made me think, wow, maybe it truly was a paranormal encounter. Maybe it was kind of part of a shared archetypical subconscious that Jung and others talk about. But it certainly both stuck with me when I was a kid and kind of got me thinking even more broadly with a wider aperture adult.
Mm. Well, that's a scary thing to have happened. I know we've heard so many stories about the Hat Man and the Newfoundland hag, which is like sleep paralysis. We had guests from another podcast to speak to us about different phenomenon, and one of the guests had experienced like the Newfoundland hag sleep paralysis. So I feel bad for anybody that's experienced that, because that I've not experienced it, but that would be, I think, one of the scariest things I could probably ever imagine in my
Sure.
life. So I'm also curious, again, when you were younger, growing up and going to select different careers, did you always want to kind of go into this TV author profession, or did you see yourself take a path, like a different path, or was this something that was kind of like your end goal, or just
Oh,
popped
yeah.
up?
You find people in my business and your business all over the spectrum who say, "I knew from the moment, whatever I saw this X, Y, or Z that I was going to devote my life to this." One of the primary characters in our book, my book, I guess I call it our book because everybody who worked on the show has kind of contributed in some capacity to the book. Um, was a wonderful man named Dr. Jeff Meldrum,
Mhm.
who was probably the world's most preeminent Bigfoot researcher and one of the few, if not the only, kind of tenured professor who not only believed in Bigfoot, but devoted a chunk of his career to proving Bigfoot. And he describes vividly the moment when he saw the Patterson Gimlin film in a movie theater in 1967. And just that was a profound kind of experience that changed the trajectory of his whole life.
Mhm.
I'm the opposite. I thought I knew what I was going to do growing up. because it didn't require much thought. My parents, as I mentioned, were both academics.
Mhm.
I was kind of supposed to be an academic to the degree that we have a kind of a family business. That's the business. Um, but a number of things happened, just random. One was the most important thing that happened was I realized that to be a successful academic, you have to slice some particular subject so thinly and become the world's greatest expert in this tiny little thing, right?
Right.
17th century French drapes, whatever. And I just didn't have the patience or attention span to devote, that much time to that one little thing. I like hopscotching around and playing with ideas and
Mhm.
sampling stuff. You can say that I'm, a dilettante by nature, that, kind of made dilettantism a hobby and then a profession. And the book and the show kind of reflect that, right? The TV show is not dedicated exclusively to UFOs. It's not dedicated exclusively to Bigfoot. It's really watching an episode of the show. It's very eclectic. It's kind of like, going to one of those big buffets on a cruise ship where you can, have as much or as little as you want. And the book is the same way, right? Each
Mhm.
chapter is devoted to one particular genre of anomaly, if you will.
Oh, wow.
So what happened though was here's the part of the story that it's getting too long. But I left college. I finished college. I was supposed to go to graduate school. Instead, I tried to be a musician in New York for a couple of years. During the course of that, I kind of fell into journalism. Started writing articles for newspapers and magazines. I had done a lot of radio in college. I started being a radio reporter for some local news
Mm.
radio stations in New York. And then through the music scene, believe it or not, I met some people in the TV business. And in the course of our evolving friendship, they said, "Hey, we've got this position, but we need somebody for it at their show." And that's how I ended up getting into television.
Oh my gosh. Oh, wow. That is such a full circle kind of a thing.
Yeah. And now I don't know how to do anything else. So I'm
Oh.
stuck.
Oh my gosh. Well, I read that you are super analytical and you like to analyze all kinds of information. And I'm kind of curious where that technique kind of came from. Were you always kind of like an analytical type person? And was there anybody that helped inspire you to delve into these topics and know what to look for, or did that just kind of come naturally for you?
Oh, that's a good question. You got all the personal questions here, Tracy. Wow. Uh,
I'm
the
curious.
doc- like the Dr. Phil show. No, it's great. It was wonderful. I'm flattered that you have even marginal interest in any of these things. So about me. Um, so yeah, so I mean, I came up as kind of a math and science whiz, and that's what I thought I was going to do.
Mhm.
Um, then I realized that all the girls I wanted to date in college were not in my math classes. So I ended up, studying other stuff. And then what happened was I kind of fell into journalism, fell into it. That's not exactly accurate. I was drawn to it when I got a taste of it
Mhm.
because, it felt like, and this you'll hear a lot from younger journalists, right? It felt like something that had an element of righteousness to it, right? There's a lot of BS out there. There's a lot of lies. There's a lot of, deliberate misrepresentation and misinformation.
Mhm.
And to the degree that journalism, when it's done right, can either expose information that's been suppressed or amplify information that has been ignored or just kind of try to dial down push back on the rising tide of BS a little bit. It felt like something that was not just good to do, but kind of in alignment with my kind of psychometric background,
Mhm.
with my psychometric profile, if you will, of how I approach things. Now, I want to say, and I say this in the book, there are people who, make almost a fetish out of formal reasoning and the scientific method as clearly understood and empiricism in the traditional sense, to the point that they yes, it's good that they have a sensitive BS detector and they're precise about what they say and think. But the downside of that can be that you completely shut yourself off from the possibilities of exotic explanations or anomalous phenomena being the case. When the fact of the matter is that anomalous things happen. Yes, they're rare, but that doesn't mean they're non-existent. While I was writing, I think the intro to the book or one of the early chapters of the book, which was in the fall of 2024, okay, I noted that 3 like history making anomalies had just happened back to back. Freddie Freeman had just hit a grand slam home run to walk on game 1 of the World Series. Hurricane, I'm going to forget the name, either Hurricane Matthew or Michael had just ripped through and annihilated a good chunk of Western North Carolina. And Donald J. Trump had just pulled off the most unprecedented, anomalous political comeback in the history of the American Republic. Okay. So that's 3 radical, off the charts improbabilities that had happened within the course of like 3 weeks of a given, news period. So, what does that mean? Well, it means that yes, maybe we should understand the world in our life as a series of kind of normal equilibrium positions interrupted by these disruptive anomalies. Or maybe we've got it wrong. Maybe we should view history and experience in the universe as actually a series of radical anomalies that happen to just be spaced out by these periods of boredom.
Oh, I like that. That's a fascinating way to put it. That was so cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
And the only thing I don't like is mentioning the Freddie Freeman home run because I'm a Yankee fan, and that's not a good memory for me.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. I remember staying up late to watch that game 1 of the World Series, but yeah, that was quite a way to end a World Series game. Miguel, with regard to your book, Evidence of the Extraordinary, I'm curious, when did you realize you wanted to maybe take some of the themes of the show and extend them, flesh them out a little bit into a full-length book?
Yeah, great question. So, a couple things. You want to, when you do a book like this, you don't want to just be copying and pasting the scripts, and otherwise, why would anybody read the book, when they could just watch the TV show? But as I mentioned earlier, one of the first things I think we had said is that there's a lot to know about this stuff. And the truth is, when you're making an hour-long TV show that has, 6, 7, 8 segments in it, you are constrained just by the timing and the pace of the show about how much you can say about any given topic, which, by the way, is fine. I actually like working within the constraints of time and budget and format. Otherwise, any given project can just sprawl and, never actually get done.
Yeah.
A lot of great books are never actually written because of that very problem. They're not constrained by time or money or format. But what happened was, so I would look at these initial research or some of the background on these stories that we're doing, and then we would just be able to kind of touch on some of these elements. But there would be either long research memos, only a fraction of which made it into the thing, or a long version of a piece, right? Like a 7.5 minute cut of a piece that ended up being 5 minutes. And then all the great people that I spoke to, the Ken Gerhards and the Lou Elizondos and I could spend all night talking about the great folks we have on the show who not only gave their time on camera to contribute to the show, but who took some extra time to actually educate me and point me in the right directions and, kind of open my eyes to a lot of this stuff. And so yes, basically there was an excess of content, but then the question is, is it really worth writing a book about? Is there possibly a market for this? Right. I mean, there's probably, like I said, all sorts of content you can find about 17th century French drapes, but is any serious publisher going to commission a book, greenlight a book project about that? Probably not. But what I also realized was, and the book shouldn't just exist, but it should exist now, is because a lot of these topics that were considered purely fringe, purely, you know, kind of the kooky woo-woo tinfoil hat stuff, are now moving, however incrementally, into the mainstream.
Right.
And consequently, more and more people are taking interest in them. Not everybody's going to want to devote their life to, you know, searching for UFOs in the Nevada desert or hunting for Bigfoot near the Florida Georgia line, as actually I was 2 nights ago.
Really?
Really? Yes.
Yeah.
Really.
Wow.
And but a lot more people like myself are going to want to at least have cocktail party level fluency in a lot of these topics. And that's what the book, that's the kind of value proposition of the book. If you buy the book and read it, and by the way, you don't have to read it front to back. It's not one of those, you know, it's not homework, right? You can dip your nose in and out of the chapters that you like and you won't be lost. You can get, you know, kind of a working man's or a layman's fluency in this stuff, which is, I would say, not just fun, but valuable because it is becoming more and more mainstream.
Yeah. I'm curious, start to finish, how long did this writing process take?
Well, do you want me to account for the procrastination time? Does that count or not?
Yeah, you're thinking about it during that time, aren't you?
Yeah. So about a year, I guess, is the thing. So I conceived it and I mapped it out and I had a blueprint. By the way, I would hope that there's some people out there who are thinking about writing a book, who have a book in them. And I say writing a book, I've done it a total of twice here. So I'm not, you know, I'm not Stephen King, but I do say that it's ultimately a 2-step process. Step 1, write a crappy book. In other words, don't be intimidated by that blinking cursor on your empty monitor. Don't get jammed up saying like, oh my gosh, I'm on the same dance floor as William Shakespeare and Stephen King and whoever else your literary heroes are, and say, okay, every single thing I type has to be great, because you'll never finish and you probably will never start. So write a crappy book. Just get it out there. Machete your way through the jungle of your story and your outline. Step 2, go back and turn it into a
very good advice.
I'm quite confident I executed step 1. I'm not entirely sure I executed step 2 to the fullest, but I tried. Daddy tried, kids. But then,
well, it's a major publisher putting the book out, right?
Yeah, you know, I mean, it helps. It helps when you have a contract and you have a deadline and they say, we need the book by this time. It's amazing, by the way, how many people don't even do that. I mean, I couldn't believe it. Like my editor was like so grateful that I actually had the integrity to, you know, adhere to the terms of the publishing contract and deliver the thing on time. A lot of people don't. But the other thing I would say is in terms of like how you do these things, me personally, there goes the light. It's getting spooky now for sure. Me personally, you have to put yourself on a regimen. So at some point, you know, I was dilly-dallying and I was making progress. I said, at some point I said, okay, I've got to do 1,000 words a day. This is famously how Norman Mailer did things, right? Except that he did like 5,000 words before noon. Me, 1,000 words a day, just make the progress, et cetera, and you get there.
Oh my God.
That's a good way to do it.
It absolutely is. I would like to touch on UFOs for a minute, if you wouldn't mind. I'm really curious about this topic. I've been reading
lamp a little bit. Maybe this will upgrade the light. I don't know. Such an amateur.
Spooky ghost stories.
Yeah, right.
Alien stories.
If I put this here, maybe the light will be right.
Yeah, those watching on YouTube may have noticed that Miguel is kind of slowly receding into the background, but a little more light would.
The darkness has me. All right. Is this any better?
Yeah. You know, it's funny. It's funny we mentioned that because I remember Tracy about, I don't know, a year and a half ago. we were doing a show. I don't remember who we were interviewing, but the lights went out in the room where I do the show. And I don't know why, because the rest of the power in the house did not go out. And the bulb that went out was not a bad bulb. It had not like worn out. It was still good. I don't know if you remember that show, but I went into darkness and then I said, I better take a break because people are going to wonder where the heck I am.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Bruce also, he hosts ghost tours in Cooperstown, so he
Uh-huh.
might have brought home a ghost with him that evening.
Well,
Well, we're
yeah.
glad you made it back.
Exactly.
Need you, Bruce.
Woohoo.
So Tracy, I'm sorry, you were in the middle of an intelligent and perspicacious question when I started dealing with the lamp.
That is okay. I wanted to just talk about UFOs, and I've been reading about like the Tic Tac UFOs that the U.S. Navy had been tracking at one point.
Yep.
Um, and of course, there were a number of sightings, or what they thought might have been drones or Tic Tacs or UFOs over New Jersey and other parts of the country. I'm just kind of curious. Have you had a chance to look into any of those sightings, and what do you think about them?
Right. So I'm happy you brought this up. This is a vast topic. The biggest chapter in the book is about UFOs, and frankly, you could argue that 2, if not 3 chapters really are about the UFO question. So what I always say is people have to understand that a number of things can be true, right? That you don't have to kind of find a grand unified theory of everything that is going to totally explain every single sighting and make it all make sense. Okay.
Mhm.
So one of the things that can be true is there are indeed documented sightings of aerial phenomena that the government cannot explain. It also very well could be true that foreign rival militaries are using some of their technology that we haven't seen before for purposes of reconnaissance or intelligence gathering, specifically regarding our more sophisticated air defense systems.
Right.
And thirdly, it can also be true that people want to believe what they want to believe. And they are inclined to think that, a moth, captured at a distance on their flashlight is a UFO that they've summoned, or that planes lining up at JFK are a famous black triangle UFO or what have you. And I just say 2 things. To the skeptics, you have to keep an open mind. You have to, admit the possibility that, some of these quote unquote kooky theories might be true, especially when they are being, corroborated not only by military grade videos that the government says it can't explain, but by what I would call, in the book, I call them the parade of whistleblowers, which is the series of highly credentialed, highly honorable individuals who have come forward and not just kind of risked their reputations, but risked a perjury charge, testifying under oath to Congress that not only do UFOs exist, but that they've heard and they've gathered enough information and testimony to believe sincerely that the government has long had a reverse engineering and retrieval program that they have semi-successfully kept hidden from not just the public, but from Congress and from the president.
It is such a fascinating topic. I'm curious, have you come across a story that made you really think that for sure, yes, indeed, there is life out there, or maybe aliens have visited planet Earth?
Right. So are you limiting it just to videos of things in the sky, or more broadly other things as well? The reason I ask is because you may well be familiar with a kind of emerging theory that these objects don't necessarily come from other planets or galaxies, but may come from the bottom of the ocean.
That's right.
Sometimes referred to as the crypto-terrestrial theory, that has been advanced and articulated quite brilliantly by a guy named Lou Elizondo, who is, seminal figure in the history of modern ufology, and also a regular on the show, and also a friend. I'm proud to call him a friend. So we have seen a couple of videos of things from the ocean floor. I'm thinking specifically of a video that was shot by a NOAA submersible off the coast of Alaska a couple of years ago.
Mhm.
And they came across this thing. They're live streaming it, so you can hear their reactions, and they have no idea what this is. It looks like an alien golden egg, like one of the creatures out of Predator or of Aliens would have emerged from. And at the time, at least, at the time that we aired the piece, they couldn't identify it. They, it didn't fit the characteristics of a coral or a sponge or a rock formation, and it looked a hell of a lot like some undiscovered species had hatched from this egg. The video is out there. You can check it out. So that's what made me think, whether or not they're aliens, however we define them, there certainly is much that is yet to be discovered that that could well be more than just one of the kind of standard classifications of life that we have and have classified so far.
Oh my gosh, there's so much out there. Oh, that's fascinating. I'm gonna have to look for that one as well.
Yeah. Now, knowing me and my luck, like 2 weeks ago, the Smithsonian are going to say, "Oh yeah, we identified it as a football that got thrown overboard." But certainly, and we had serious. It's not just me. It was
Mhm.
a team of marine biologists and other experts with letters after their name who said that they could not identify this thing.
Oh my gosh, I just find the whole thing so fascinating anyway, because there's so many different stories and footage and theories, and I'm like a sponge, I just absorb it all. I think it's amazing. So thank you.
Sure. And of course, there are all these tons. There's tons of UFO videos out there. Again, many of them can be explained, and many of them
Yeah.
are people unintentionally or intentionally misidentifying the things. That's kind of what a lot of our experts do. But there are that handful of often great military grade clips where you can see the telemetry. It's not just like a dot against a black background, but it's there's data that can tell you about the altitude, the speed, the attitude, the temperature, the acceleration, all sorts of important data points that have led some experts to think we cannot explain this. The one that I'm rambling now, but the one UFO video that kind of changed my mind, or opened my mind rather,
Mhm.
was something that's was shot by a FedEx pilot. And this is a pilot, Air Force veteran, a guy who we trust with. It was a FedEx plane, so it wasn't like he was carrying 300 passengers, but he was carrying, responsible for human lives and cargo and all this stuff.
Mhm.
Not a dude who spends all day taking bong hits on his mother's couch in the basement, right? Watching Stranger Things.
Right.
A guy with responsibility, right? He's flying the FedEx plane up from Monterrey, Mexico to Memphis, where they all land, right? And near the border, Mexican-American border, he looks out and he and his crew see this light, and they swear that it was a UFO that came down, hit them with kind of a lighthouse kind of rotating beam, stayed positioned off the port side at around 280, 290 degrees bearing for like 20 minutes, and then went off. And they have video of it, and the video of the object itself sucks. It's just a white dot against the black background, and then the camera, the smartphone thing is trying to find focus, so it comes in out of focus because there's the windshield in between.
Mhm.
That's like whatever. But then the camera pans over to the console where they
Uh-huh.
have the radar display and the TCAS, the collision avoidance system that detects other airborne objects, and it's not on either of those, either the radar or the TCAS. So that was for me like pretty profound. Both the sincere testimony of this, I would say, honorable gentleman, Captain Eric Delgado, and that interesting piece of data. Now, you'll find skeptics for every one of these things, by the way. I mean, it's not like there's, uniform, everybody's, in complete agreement. All the skeptics have been confounded. And no. the skeptics have something to say about every one of these videos. So if you're looking for a way to debunk them, you usually can. But what I'm saying is that some of them are harder to debunk than others. You have to commit some kind of intellectual acrobatics and contortions in many cases to explain away some of these things.
Yeah.
Mitch Horowitz. Do you guys know Mitch Horowitz? He's
No.
you
Yeah.
should have him on the show. He's really great, specifically about ghosts and the afterlife and stuff like that. And he's written some great books. He said it really well, and I quote him, like, you can be a rational believer
Mhm.
and you can be an ideological skeptic, right?
Sure.
So, just because you come at one mode of analysis, or just because you arrive at a conclusion, doesn't necessarily mean that you've arrived there through, the purest and most incorruptible, lines of reasoning.
We continue with our guest, Miguel Sancho, the author of the new book, Evidence of the Extraordinary. Miguel, I want to talk a little bit about cryptids. And for
Sure.
those who are not familiar with the term, those are creatures whose presence disputed by many people in science, but not necessarily totally debunked either. Cryptids involve everything from Bigfoot to the Chupacabra, the Jersey Devil, the Loch Ness Monster. Is there a particular cryptid that you really find fascinating?
Well, I find them all fascinating. Maybe you meant to do it. There's one that I believe actually exists.
No, just that not necessarily that you believe it exists, but you just think it's very interesting, the theory behind it, the legend,
Sure.
interesting to research.
Yeah. So the answer is yes. Many of them are truly fascinating on a deep, profound, intellectual level. Some of them are kind of silly, all right, and some of them, they're kind of local legends that have kind of been exploited into, tourist economies for certain places. The Yeti, right? The Yeti is notorious in Russia for being exploited for, to try to boost tourism activity in impoverished hinterlands of Russia, right? There's one famous case where a local governor, like, ordered one of his government employees to put on a Yeti suit and go out, and they cooked up some Yeti footage just for this very purpose. Notorious case. It wasn't that long ago. All right. So you have to enter that whole discussion with the understanding of, that is often the case. Two things. I will say that, referencing Dr. Jeff Meldrum, I was, convinced that the Bigfoot thing, there was just no way. I mean, let's just stop right here. Because in the age of, trail cams and LiDAR and thermal imaging and all that, there's no way that we could have a large primate in North America and it not be conclusively, incontrovertibly proven by now with the same standards that zoologists had to adhere to when they, submit a new discovery for identification of a new species. But Meldrum had an answer to almost every of the critical questions. Why don't we have a Bigfoot fossil? Well, because paleontology is notoriously serendipitous. There are species that have been discovered only because, some random thing happened, right? He would always talk about the Gigantopithecus, which is a large Asian primate that was only discovered because some scientist was strolling through a street market. I want to say in China. I'm going to get some of these details wrong. Forgive me. China or Nepal or wherever, and found this big gigantic tooth for sale as like a trinket or as a good luck charm or whatever. And so he bought it, and then, sure enough, that built out into enough scientifically valid evidence to establish that there was this creature called Gigantopithecus. The point being that, yes, maybe Bigfoot either exists or did exist, and we just haven't found the fossils yet because fossils don't just make themselves manifest automatically, right? They're literally buried under layers of rock and stuff. And he would add, parenthetically, I remember him saying that, the soil composition of the American Northwest is also notoriously inhospitable to the scientific process of fossilization. So things like that, I mean, there are literally, 10 questions that I would hit him with every time. And he had answers to. Now, I do want to say that the Bigfoot community is in a moment of crisis, right? Because its most totemic and important piece of evidence, the Patterson-Gimlin film, has now been the subject of a rather rigorous, rather convincing documentary that debunks the whole thing as a fraud. Although people have been saying the Patterson-Gimlin film has been phony, for a long, long time. But, I was talking to a friend who I actually went out Bigfoot hunting with this last weekend just to get a taste of it, who was saying like, the number of weekly downloads from his podcast has suffered considerably because of this movie. But nevertheless, I would submit that it is a fascinating thing to discuss and to consider, especially if you're of a mind that we should take Native American legends a little bit more seriously than perhaps we have, right? There's a traditional, I don't want to say racism, chauvinism, whatever, cultural bias that a lot of what the Native Americans talked about was purely myth or superstition or, unscientific legend making. Okay, maybe that's one way to look at it, but maybe it actually was a form of reportage. Maybe it's what sometimes is referred to as proto-data. Maybe these people actually had seen something. And the truth is there's lots of creatures that we now totally believe exist. We have them in zoos that were dismissed as indigenous people's legends for a long time. I believe the gorilla was one. When the famous story, the duck-billed platypus, right? I remember doing a report on the duck-billed platypus in 4th grade. The duck-billed platypus, we all know it exists now. But when British naturalists first discovered one and shipped it back to Britain, I want to say the Royal Academy of Sciences or whatever the august institution was, they didn't believe it even though there was one sitting in front of them. They were convinced it was some sort of taxidermy trick. So again, many, many examples of species that were either ridiculed as completely imaginary or just the stuff of legends that made their way through the course of time and discovery into the annals of science. It just, it happens that, cryptozoology just leapfrogs into zoology.
You mentioned the documentary. It's called Capturing Bigfoot.
Yeah.
Have you seen it? And if so, what'd you think of it?
I've seen parts of it. I haven't seen the whole thing. I should. I will before my next interview because it's embarrassing that I haven't. But it is. I've certainly read about it, and it seems pretty convincing. Now, that said, I have my own experience with the Patterson-Gimlin film, which is we did a special, and we had a guy named Isaac Tian who had done a computer composite of like 35 different copies of the film because the original had been lost. 35 different versions of the film, each of which had their little flaws and artifacts, right? Copies of the film, not versions of it, copies of the original film. And, using AI, he had come up with a much better version of it, cleaner. And we did a kind of frame by frame analysis. And there's a number of things with that were truly perplexing, such as kind of you can see what looks at least like the rippling of a calf muscle when Patty strides forward. Well, why is that relevant? It's relevant because in 1967 costumes didn't have that kind of skin tight verisimilitude, right? They looked like what they call pajama legs, right? It was basically a pair of pants with hair on them.
Right.
There were two movies that kind of broke the mold. One was 2001: A Space Odyssey. Have you ever seen the first act of that movie where they have people dressed up to look like early hominids? And then another one that came out considerably later was Altered States. And I'm sure I'm forgetting one that happened in between, but certainly with 2001: A Space Odyssey, to pull that off, you had to have a big Hollywood budget. And nobody is claiming that Patterson had a big Hollywood budget to do anything like that. Now, again,
Right.
if you have family members saying it was a fake and we knew it was a fake and he was a fake, that counts for something. You can't just dismiss that. But, versions of that story, people who were close to Patterson have been saying that for quite some time. There was even a, costume designer who claimed that he was the guy who made the costume. So those claims have been around for a while. I don't think, understanding that the Bigfoot thing is taking its hit now, it's never going to go away altogether. Because okay, let's say the Patterson Gimlin film was a total hoax. That doesn't necessarily mean that the Bigfoot creature never existed, right?
Sure.
It's two separate questions. And there has been a paradigm shift within the scientific community. Maybe not a shift, that might be a little dramatic, but it's certainly a paradigm adjustment among anthropologists and paleontologists who are more amenable to the hypothesis of what they call relict hominids, right? Other kind of branches or twigs from the evolutionary tree that became other species aside from the direct descent of man into current Homo sapiens. And what I'm talking about discoveries like the Denisovans in Russia, or Flores man in the island of Flores. These are creatures that existed. We know they existed, and indigenous people said they existed up through the time of Homo sapiens. So you see that we're kind of getting close, right? So in the faculty lounge, you'll find very few people willing to kind of talk seriously about something called Bigfoot. But you will find people willing to talk seriously about relict hominids. In the same way that, people in the government aren't willing to say the word UFO, but they're willing to talk about UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena. So a combination of,
Right.
New research, new data, a cultural shift, kind of equipped with some new language that helps launder some of these more kooky terms of the paranormal, has led to things like, and I write about this in the book. There was a Wall Street Journal article. I want to say it was 2023 or 2024. As I get older, I get the dates wrong. About serious scientists spending serious time going on Bigfoot expeditions, oftentimes anonymously because they don't want to incur the lingering reputational risk. But there are serious people who are seriously looking into this.
I wanted to ask one more question on Bigfoot, and I know Tracy wants to get into poltergeists and that kind of activity. But Tracy was telling me there have been some recent sightings of Bigfoot, supposedly in Ontario, Canada, and also in Ohio. You mentioned that you were at the Florida border recently, involved in something related to Bigfoot.
Yeah.
Tell us about some of this recent activity.
Right. Well, it will surprise nobody that reports correlate quite closely with the number of people out there looking for Bigfoot. Ohio, there's a gentleman who has worked with us on the show. I don't know him personally. I would love to. In fact, I think I'm going to go on his show relatively soon. Named Matt Moneymaker, and he has recorded some interesting sightings of his own, including some interesting audio recordings that we've had analyzed and that were not that easy to dismiss or write off. So, and he is based in the Ohio area. So a lot of interesting stuff has been coming out of Ohio. Ontario, well, there's it's certainly like British Columbia, is where some of the earliest and most compelling sightings take place, and where a lot of the First Nations peoples had extensive reports of sightings of what we now call Bigfoot. There's been one or two things out of Ontario, I want to say, maybe not the exactly ones you're referring to, that turned out to be explainable.
Mhm.
But for my money, there's this artifact called the Chimshian Mask. I may be mispronouncing the name. That I'm trying to say the name of this First Nation civilization from the British Columbia area. And when they encountered, European explorers and scientists, they found this mask. This was in the last half of the 1800s, and the mask had these features that looked unmistakably like a primate: brow ridge, flat nose, elongated canine teeth, and this is something that Dr. Meldrum introduced me to, and he wrote about it. It's like, okay, so if this First Nation civilization was able to depict the face of a primate so accurately, how do we reconcile that with the claim and the fact that there are no known existing indigenous primate species in North America, unless they'd actually seen one? So I found that truly curious. Oh, and then regarding you were asking a little bit about what I was doing down here. So one of the more well-regarded pieces of Bigfoot footage, Patterson Gimlin film notwithstanding, something called the Brown footage, which was shot by a father-son duo, Stacy Brown, senior and junior. And we'd done a segment on the footage some years ago, and I'll tell you a story about the making of the sausage here of the book. I realized about halfway through the third chapter that I need to do more field work, right? Aside from like the TV show, which I produce out of this dark office, I need to, and I've been in the field somewhat, for various things, off and on, but I needed to do more to have, some hands-on experience with this stuff. So I resolved that I was going to go Bigfoot hunting at least once. And I wrote in the intro or the about the author stuff or something, I'm not an expert in any of this stuff, but I have, hung out with Lou Elizondo, the famed UFO guy, and I have gone Bigfooting with a famed, Bigfooter guy. Then what happened was I got totally overwhelmed with work and I got distracted with the summer. You never want to do anything in the summer in Florida. So I kept putting it off. And then I realized, oh my God, this is in the book. And I haven't gone Bigfooting with the guy yet. So I called him a few months ago and I said, okay, we've got to do this. I know I told you I was doing this. I'm not going to put something in the book that I know is inaccurate. So let's do this. So we ended up doing this past weekend, and we did not capture Bigfoot. But we did hear some cool things. I saw my first armadillo.
Oh, cool.
Which I'd never seen. And the most important thing, the most valuable thing for me was getting to know Stacy Brown, who is a really interesting guy and who knows his stuff and who has lived it and taught me a lot.
Oh my gosh. Oh, that is so fascinating. And would that be something you might consider doing again?
Yes, although I have to tell you, literally just before coming on this show, I discovered a tick on my belly.
Oh no.
And so I have to get that tick off before I go camping, looking for Bigfoot again.
Yeah, you need to take care of that. You don't want any nasties after a tick. No.
Yes.
So
Great. I recommend it. I do recommend it.
oh, that's I've not gone Bigfoot hunting before. We have like a creature they call the hairy man of Cape Breton, which
Mhm.
is pretty much similar to a Bigfoot creature, but that could be on the bucket list for later on down the road. But I'm going to kind of switch it over to poltergeist and paranormal activity.
Sure.
What are your thoughts on that? And do you think poltergeists actually exist?
So, a number of things to say about that. The book, again, leaning extensively on a couple of interviews I did with Mitch Horowitz,
Mhm.
talks about how a large chunk of the ghost community, if I can use that phrase, has gravitated to an interpretation of quantum physics, specifically quantum entanglement, that suggests, right, that a purely materialist understanding of the world and of the brain and of consciousness, and a purely linear understanding of how time works, is really getting to be dated in a way that kind of Newtonian physics has been dated by Einsteinian physics. What does that mean? It means that, depending on exactly how you interpret a lot of these things, you're almost required to start comprehending or accepting the possibility that time might not be flowing in just one direction, that number of chronologies might exist simultaneously. What does that mean? It means that indeed there may be, again, depending on your interpretive framework, the possibility that somebody who is already dead in this temporal frame of reference is alive in another frame of reference, and that those two, whatever you want to call them, frames of reference or universes or space times, can intersect. So that's a part of it. The other thing is, there is an astonishing number of people who claim to have been visited by deceased relatives or deceased loved ones. Now, are those all hallucinations? Is that all psychology? I'm sure a lot of it is.
Yeah.
But we had this very interesting video, okay, that showed a 3-year-old girl, okay, Evie, whose uncle, Tim, had died recently. And in the video, you see what was one of a series of encounters where she was sitting in her high chair and she would be kind of pointing and talking at length with somebody who she was clearly referencing as Uncle Tim.
Oh, wow.
And her family was convinced that she indeed was having a conversation with his spirit. And this didn't just happen once; it happened, a number of times. It happened enough that her mother decided to start videotaping it. And we had, a number of physicists and people look at it, and some people with, important reputations and curriculum vitae say that yes, we can, gravitate towards a materialist explanation that she was just, imagining, an imaginary friend, or that, she was a child, so she hadn't kind of grasped object permanence the way that, we do, or impermanence. But maybe it is the case that children, because they haven't had their minds kind of molded into the constraints of our quotidian reality, are able to communicate on another level with beings or spirits that we as adults kind of are conditioned to just shut ourselves out from. And again, that wasn't my opinion. It wasn't, that wasn't coming from some psychic in a storefront shop. That was coming from respected physicists.
Right. Oh my gosh, that's it's true what they say about the kids, because they don't have those experiences that we as adults have. And there is kind of like this saying, I guess, that they are a little more perceptive to things that we can't see and we can't feel. So again, it's just another fascinating type of thing.
Yeah. I mean, Stephen King, that's one thing that I think Stephen King really gets right. And he has an amazing talent for writing from the perspective of children. I consider The Shining one of the greatest works of literature in the history of the English language.
Yeah.
And, King himself, has said that in part the book is about something not paranormal. In part, the book is about the terror a child feels when he sees his dad drunk. Okay. Which can have kind of supernatural vibes to it, right? Your dad turns into a monster. But he also, in his description of, the shining part of The Shining, I think it's very, very insightful. And there's lots of, obviously, anecdotal stories of kids who have those kinds of experiences. And then, of course, on top of that, you have this whole telepathy tapes thing going on with the autistic kids, which is
That's
really
right.
remarkable.
Oh yeah, there's so much out there. It's incredible. And over time, because I mean, it's true. Like there are certain programs that I've seen that um different paranormal investigators really take it to the extreme, and it is about showmanship and just not really true cases. So it's interesting to read and to watch and just see different experiences that other people have, and you never know what's going to happen in 5 years, 10 years with the research. Anything is possible.
Yeah. Now, the one thing I will say, and I have an extended excerpt from this in the book, is that because, right, if you've lost a relative,
Hmm.
especially a child, okay, there's a deep, deep part of you that really wants to continue communicating with that person, right? You feel like you've had a limb amputated. Uh, and as a result, that intense desire, the flip side of that is it makes you vulnerable to being scammed.
Mm-hmm.
When I was, before I did this book, before I did this show, before way back, you asked how I got into journalism. My first gig actually was working as an undercover investigative producer for a syndicated show called Inside Edition.
Oh,
Okay.
wow.
And I helped out a friend. This was not, I wish I could take credit for this story, this idea. I just helped out a friend do this story. It was about psychics who
Mm,
claim to be able to find missing kids. Okay.
yeah.
And again, I'm not saying that it's 100% always, fake or fraudulent or BS. But what I am saying is we did this operation where I took a photo of somebody and went to Phoenix, Arizona and booked an appointment with this guy and gave him this picture. And I told him it was my missing sister. And he, of course, told me that my sister was dead and that if I paid him a certain amount of money, we may be able to go out and find her body. And turned out the picture, of course, was an intern at Inside Edition, and my sister was still in college and alive and well.
Hmm.
And we busted him. So I have a personal predilection to be super skeptical of that particular kind of account, only because I know that there are real people who've been seriously scammed and taken advantage of because of what we were talking about, right? The pain, the suffering, and the desire to have, you know, communication with the deceased loved one, especially if it's somebody who died suddenly, right?
Mhm.
Both my parents passed away, and I miss them every day, but I am so grateful that I was one of the people who was able to be there in the last moments and say what I needed to say to them and
Right.
be there for them, right? Imagine, maybe you guys don't need to imagine if your mother or father or some relative just dies suddenly and suddenly they're just not there and there's no way to negotiate your way out of that and it's not going to change. Um, Clearly, those are the folks who have a just overmastering desire to have one last conversation at least.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And people definitely need to, stay on their toes about stuff like that too, especially when they're in grieving mode. I know there is a case of missing children locally from where I am, and it's been almost a year, and they've had spiritual mediums and people come on board, and some are trying to get money from the family to help them find the children, and it's very tragic because I not that I don't believe in psychic mediums, but again, like I'm very skeptical about you know the true nature and if they're actually accurate.
Yeah, I mean, if I was in that situation, you want to try everything, right? What you don't want to do is say like, "I could have done something and I didn't do it." But what I would just always do it on contingency, right?
Yeah,
I'll pay you, whatever your fee is, I'll pay you that times two as soon as you find it, dead or alive.
exactly. So I'm also curious. I have another quick question for you. You have looked at so many different cases and pieces of footage over the last number of years. Is there one case or file that really sticks out for you that you totally believe it after everything is said and done? or have you not found that yet?
Huh. So I'm going to get this question a lot. So, because I do these things, so I really should have a ready-made answer for you. I mean, I've told you some of them already, right? The FedEx UFO, the alien golden egg. The one that here we go. It's going to be another sea creature. Okay.
Okay.
So people have been talking about the Kraken forever,
Mm.
right? And the Kraken, goes back to well, if you've seen Clash of the Titans, you go back to Greek mythology, but
Yeah.
it had a real moment in the sun during the Age of Exploration, when European explorers and conquerors were going out all over the globe and coming back with these stories, sailors coming back with these stories. But everybody kind of thinks it's a myth, and that the Kraken really was just like an octopus. There's another theory, just there's trying to think of the PG-13 way to say this. There's another theory expounded by a lot of scientists that says that what sailors described as the Kraken and its tentacles was really the sexual organs of blue whales that can be very long. And when blue whales are mating, they can get rough and they churn up the water. And you can see the scientific term you can Google this, is dork. That's what a dork is. Literally. Okay. That's enough about whale penises. But so
Now I know.
now you're always learning. So there was this case, though. All right. It's called the USS Stein incident. What was the USS Stein? The USS Stein was a Navy ship that had recently been equipped with a high-tech sonar system. Okay. It specifically had a coating on it, special coating to prevent anything from getting stuck on it, or barnacles or anything like that. They call it a no-foul coating.
Mhm.
The ship is out at sea. Something happens to the radar system. Not good. It gets disabled. They go back into port. They look at it, and they realize on this no-foul coating, it has been scratched and mauled. And embedded in the no-foul coating is what either looks like a tooth or a claw. Okay. So they bring in a biologist, marine biologist, the Navy, and he says, yes, we think this is most likely a giant squid. However, the size of the marks, the teeth, the so-called bite radius, all that stuff, it would have to have been a giant squid about 165 feet long. And the longest known giant squid ever observed is like 80 feet long, if that. Maybe even like 66 feet. Again, me and the numbers. But something that is easily 1.5 to 2 times bigger than the biggest giant squid ever seen. So what does that tell you? That tells you, as far as I'm concerned, there's your Kraken. All right? As far as I'm concerned, that is proof that there are not just big, but gigantic creatures still swimming around out there that we haven't discovered. And why would we discover them? Because, it's a huge ocean, and there are, it can get very deep down there and dark. When I was a kid, I write about this in the book, there was something like 300 known variations of shark. That was 1970 when I was born. Okay, now we're 55 years later, and there's 370 known varieties of shark. So they're discovering at least one new shark a year. And that's just the ones that we're seeing. It's certainly, and again, this is not coming from me, it's coming from our in-house marine biologist, Dr. Shea Steingast. It's as much as we know anything, we certainly know that there have been gigantic species that have been alive within, the last 100 years, that have gone extinct, that we just never saw and never will see, because they've gone extinct and their carcasses go to the bottom of the ocean and deteriorate because of the ocean, because of the pressure, whatever. So I encourage people to research things like the USS Stein incident. Look at just the discovery of something called the megamouth shark, which happened while I was alive. That's nuts that, they found this thing again, purely serendipitously. And it exists, and it's big, and it's monstrous. So of course, once we actually discover it and have a carcass and, classify it in our classification system, it loses its legendary status, right? It stops being enchanted. So we stop thinking about it in a certain way. But there are plenty of things that, will someday be documented and classified that are now purely a matter of myth. That's what.
Oh, interesting. Now, as you and your colleagues are kind of like looking at these cases and talking about them with each other and talking to the real people who have experienced these things.
I'm so happy that
Um,
wasn't me.
okay. I'm
Yeah,
just
that
very,
was my infamous cat.
oh my goodness.
So great.
Yes, he's causing damage in the house.
That's what cats do.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of curious, just when you're talking about these cases with your colleagues and talking to the real people who experience some of these things, whether they're whether you guys believe that they're true or not. I'm just kind of curious, like, is there a process or just a way of kind of handling these claims and just being respectful of what these people are believing? I'm just kind of curious because I know like it could be really hard because you could be talking to somebody who has a very silly story or something totally unbelievable. And I'm just kind of curious, like, how do you guys handle something like that?
That's a great question. And it cuts really to, I think, how our show has been able to have the longevity that it has. And it comes down to being respectful to the experiencers and at least prima facie hospitable to the hypothesis. You have to. One thing that our executive producer, our executive at the network has said a couple times is like, we can't have anybody on the show saying it can't be Bigfoot because Bigfoot doesn't exist, right? That kind of just circular, tautological reasoning doesn't cut it, right? It can't be a UFO because we know that UFOs don't exist. Okay, that again, we have to kind of we have to dismiss it on its own granular terms. It can't be Bigfoot because Bigfoot is not known to play frisbee. It had to be something that takes the hypothesis on its own terms and proceeds from there. So yes, so some people have, and it's true, some people have profound experiences that have changed their lives deeply and permanently
Mhm.
that you and I would just find absurd. Okay. Um, I would say that a good percentage of UFO abduction experiencers will tell you things that you just find a lot harder to accept. They go a lot further than I was out in my dad's cornfield and I saw something in the sky that didn't move like anything I'd ever seen before. Right? No, the experience or the abduction experiences go much, much further, much more intimate.
Mhm.
So, but you have to respect that, right? I mean, many, many people have had experiences that cannot be empirically, externally verified, but were true enough for them that they've changed their lives. I mean, you look at almost any religious person, certainly the people who found religions, right?
Mhm.
And the people who become saints or become, patriarchs or matriarchs or whatever, they have all had close encounters with God.
Right.
And many, many other people have too. Like, you go to church on Sunday or go to a synagogue or a mosque or whatever, you'll find people there who will tell you that they have seen an angel or God has
Mhm.
spoken, to them, whatever. And I can't prove that, but I'm certainly not going to tell them that, they were just hallucinating or that the experience meant nothing. That's kind of how we organize our lives, right? On the basis of intense experiences that change our viewpoints. So that's one thing we do. But we also we're very upfront with people, right? I mean, we have people sign, releases when they send, give us our permission to use the video, and we're upfront. We might call this thing a fake, or more likely, this thing that you're convinced is Bigfoot. We might say it's an elk, an elk's mating call or whatever. So you just have to let them know, not deceive them, and say just because our experts say one thing and our conclusions are yours, it doesn't mean we're gonna say that you're foolish or or fraudulent.
Right.
There are some people who are fraudulent, right? Making money off claims that they know are false. We'll call that out too. But again, the whole point of the show and the book, and I think any person who has a true open mind has to be respectful of people who've had these experiences.
Oh, wow. I definitely appreciate that. I love that. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Miguel, I had one final kind of a philosophical question, sort of an offshoot of what you and Tracy have been talking about.
Yeah.
There are investigators out there. They are sensationalist, overly dramatic, not necessarily fraudulent, not necessarily making things up out of whole cloth, but they perhaps exaggerate. They are overly theatrical. Do they hurt the cause, or are we able to dismiss them so quickly that it really doesn't hurt the cause? What's your thought on that?
Yeah. So I think it depends on the field. Like the serious Bigfoot people. We keep coming back to Bigfoot. The serious Bigfoot people will tell you that the Bigfoot hoaxers have, just been a stone around the neck of the people who want to take it seriously and do serious research, because they just muddy the water so much that, again, like, tenured professors won't want to be identified with doing anything that smells of Bigfoot research, because there's reputational risk involved. Why is there reputational risk involved? Because there's so many hoaxers and fakers out there that it makes it seem like everything to do with Bigfoot has to be a hoax or a fake. So yeah, you talk to people who take Bigfoot seriously, and they have, they're really, really tired of both intentional hoaxers and people who advocate theories that they think are just too outlandish to be taken seriously. Similarly, the UFO folks, right? There is such a thing as, military footage that is not necessarily as great as the Tic Tac, the famous 2004 Nimitz Tic Tac that Tracy was talking about a little bit earlier, right? If something's just shot off another monitor and it doesn't have the telemetry and nobody serious has looked at it, and we, don't have that much information about its provenance, yes, we can say it's, military footage because it was shot, off the deck of a destroyer or something, but it doesn't mean that it withstands scrutiny as much as other stuff does. So yes, so a lot of the UFO people also get annoyed when some of the stuff gets overhyped.
Oh my gosh, this has been such a fascinating conversation this evening. I've definitely learned a lot from you, and I think there's still so much more to learn, because I know I'm pretty fascinated with this whole subject, and Bruce, I know you are as well. So this has been absolutely wonderful.
You succeeded in getting me to talk so much that I'm now short of breath and hoarse and coughing. So that's a win. Congratulations. I want to apologize to your viewers. The lighting, when we started, the sun was out, the lighting was great, and now it looks like I'm like in a cave. The good news is that when I'm overlit, my bald head can get shiny, and that could be a bit of a distraction. So we sidestepped that problem.
Oh my goodness.
Maybe you can amp up the contrast in post production, so it won't look quite as diabolical, like playing the organ here.
Oh my gosh. I will see what I can do.
Yeah.
So And I know that Bruce has one final question for you. And I know from my perspective, I would hope that we could have you back at some point again to talk more.
Oh, it would be a lot of fun. I've enjoyed this a lot. As long as we don't talk about me as much next time. Let's talk
Oh,
about, other stuff that you guys are doing.
and Bruce,
I find myself boring pretty quickly.
oh, this has been fun. And Bruce, you're on mute. I'm sorry. I know you're trying to say something. Sorry. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I was dealing with a cat, so I apologize for that. Before you lose your voice, Miguel, what is the best way for fans to purchase, or in this case, pre-order the book? It's set for release on May 5th. Evidence of the Extraordinary. If people want to order the book early, what should they do?
Right. So it's sold. I asked this question of my publisher. What should I say here? It's available anywhere that good books are sold, and my book too. So wherever you go and buy your normal books. Now, what you're not supposed to do is direct people to any one particular place, but there's certainly a company whose name rhymes with Glamazon that it can be sold at, but also your local bookstore will be able to order it, and any other bookseller. I think I learned the other day, I should have known this because I shop there all the time. I think Target even sells books. Did you know that?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, see, I continue to learn. And look,
How
I would
about
just tell people,
the publisher? How about the publisher website for pre-order?
yes, Simon and Schuster, Atria is an imprint of Simon and Schuster, so by all means, feel free to go there too. It's all Googleable. Once you just if you can muster up the strength to remember the name of the book, Evidence of the Extraordinary, and pump that into a search engine, you will be properly directed by the algorithms. And look, this is my pitch. The book is not homework. It is supposed to be fun. It is written for, it is yes, you will learn things whether you want to or not, but it's meant to be a work of entertainment that will engage you and entertain you the same way any of its competitors will on whatever medium, screen, or platform you see. So don't consider it a chore to read this book, and you don't have to finish it. I mean, I think it's great every page, but you can eat what you like. Consider it like a cafeteria on a cruise ship. And the other thing I would say is, if you don't want to buy my book, here's my mission. Now I'm preaching. If you don't want to buy my book, that's okay. But buy some book. Read something. I don't care what it is. Read a book. It can be manga. It can be the Old Testament.
Yeah.
It can be a crime story. Whatever. Buy a book.
I agree. Reading is
Always
important.
good advice. Our guest has been Miguel Sancho, author of the new book, Evidence of the Extraordinary. It is from Atria Books, a division of Simon & Schuster, coming out on May the 5th. Miguel also is the executive producer for the TV show The Proof is Out There, and that airs new episodes Friday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern Time on the History Channel. Miguel, we thank you very much. It's been a lot of fun, very insightful and entertaining as well.
Oh, this is so much fun. Thank you again, and thank you to your audience for putting up with this.
Our thanks to Miguel Sancho. Also, of course, thanks to Tracy Asteria, executive producer and co-host of the show.